Hello, welcome back to Full Time, presented by Amazon Business. I am Tamerra Griffin, freshly back from something that was supposed to be a vacation, but just ended up being me bouncing around a lot. But I feel like I came back and it's firmly and officially summertime. The ACs are whirring, the popsicles are melting down our hands, and that means it's time to talk about summer tournaments, specifically the Euros, and that is what this episode is going to be all about. Consider this your Euros pre-tournament guide. We are going to be walking through each of the groups A, B, C, and D. We've invited a bunch of our pals from the Athletic, some of whom are going to be in Switzerland covering the tournament when it kicks off on July 2nd. Lots of information, lots of teams, lots of names, players that you need to be on the lookout for, coaches who could be shaking some things up for teams that need a necessary shaking up. We've got you covered on all of it. And of course, to do that, I need to be joined by my co-host, Meg Linehan. Meg, how are you doing? Are you staying cool, first of all? Are you hydrating? Yeah. Because you're going through it over there in Vermont.
Yeah, we're surviving this mini heat wave, but it's going. Also, if you're watching the video, I'm in a co-working space, so that way I can be recording in air conditioning, but we've been joking this entire time of how I look like I'm actually rooting for the Netherlands because it's just this bright orange background. So just as an FYI, there's no bias here.
Journalistic integrity maintained.
Right. So, I mean, to be fair, we're going to get into it. I think we're going to have a lot of feelings about these Euros teams. Obviously, if you're an NWSL fan, there will be some rooting interests in this tournament in a way that maybe we haven't really experienced before in this league. So it's going to be an exciting summer of a lot of soccer.
Totally. And I mean, the NWSL is going to be on a break, so y'all are going to need something to watch anyway. Also, AFCON is going on, which we will get to in future episodes. But today, it's all about the Euros. And on that note, I need to share some programming changes because we want to make sure that you're covered and up to date from the start of this tournament through the end. And we've decided to change some things up a little bit. I'm sorry I'm going to have to read some of this because I want to make sure I'm getting everything right.
It's a lot.
Yes. So the flagship show, this one you're listening to right now with Meg and I, will be moving from our usual Wednesday slot to Thursdays for the month of July to accommodate the Euros. And now, instead of Monday's full-time review and Friday's full-time focus, your host for that show, Jillian Sakovitz, will be going to Full-Time Euros. That's what we're going to be calling the show, a tournament-focused reaction podcast. If you listen to us during the Olympics, think something similar to that sort of cadence that will drop at the end of every round of matches. She'll be taking you inside the tournament, and she'll be also joined by our colleagues at The Athletic who are covering it to get some color behind-the-scenes action that you won't really be able to get anywhere else. So, just to recap, after the first round of matches in the group stage, you will get a podcast. After the second round of matches in the group stage, you will get another podcast. I'm starting to feel like Oprah. Love this for me. After the third round of matches in the group stage, you get a podcast. The same goes for quarterfinals, semifinals, and of course, the finals. And I'm not going to give anything away, but just know that we are cooking up things for the final because it is almost inevitably going to be a banger, and we want to make sure that we are leaning as far into that moment as possible. So stay tuned because there will probably be more announcements about that on the way. The point is, when it comes to the Euros, we got you covered.
Yes. It's also, this is the perfect time to be like, you should probably just subscribe to the podcast wherever you actually listen to it, because it's going to be so much easier when you get that little notification first thing in the morning being like, hey, you have a podcast. Right? Just imagine that notification is Tamerra's Oprah voice saying, and you get a podcast. There you go. You're done.
100%. Yeah, and we will keep you posted on how all of this goes as we go because this is new, but it's exciting and it's going to be great. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're starting off with Group A, getting into these Euros groups. All right, to kick things off with the groups, we are joined by our colleague across the pond, Megan Feringa, who is going to walk us through Group A, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, and Finland. Megan, welcome to the show. Let's start with the hosts, Switzerland. A lot is riding on this team, not necessarily in terms of expectations of them winning the tournament, because let's be real, but they are hosts. And I remember when that was announced being a bit surprised because Switzerland footballing history hasn't been the strongest, but how are you assessing this team going into the tournament?
It's really interesting that you talk about how they got the bid to host it, because we're going to do a piece on The Athletic about it, but it's really fascinating. And actually, Switzerland's, their bidding team were all women, and that was like quite a historic moment. It's because most bidding teams, there's sort of this amalgamation of like men and women, mostly men, but Switzerland decided to do a team of all women. They also decided to put in a rap, so like just stay tuned because it's a really cool story.
Like a song? Like the music?
A song, yeah.
I definitely associate Switzerland with rapping. I don't know about...
Yeah.
Okay, so also time out real quick. We're gonna have to live record Tamerra
I'm still
watching
processing.
this rap. Okay, continue.
Yes.
Okay, so that's like
Swiss
to preface everything. And people keep thinking about the host. Like historically, hosts have done really well in this tournament. I say historically, the last 2 Euros, it's like, wow, the host, there's a superpower here. Switzerland will have to like massively channel that energy to do this. Like they are not in a great space at the moment. Ramona Bachmann is obviously out with an ACL injury, and like if you want to get into omens, that doesn't really feel like a great one. For those who don't know who she is, like she's sort of the taliswoman of Swiss football, so it's a real shame. But like if you just kind of look at their form, I think they're winless in their last 8 games. Going into the Euros, they've got sort of a pre-Euro game against the Czech Republic. They haven't won a game at all in 2025, like this calendar year. So it's not been great, but you know, sometimes form can change. The problem with Switzerland is that you've just got this mix of senior and youth players, and it hasn't really gelled the way that I think a lot of people expected it to.
Interesting. All right. I mean, it will, I think, just be interesting to watch how Switzerland reacts to their national team as well, just in terms of, I don't think the expectations are there when you think about the host nations of other major tournaments. Like I think in England, right, the expectations for England were so massive. I don't know if that same sort of ratio of expectation to host is quite there for Switzerland. And so maybe that will give them a little bit of grace of, okay, we are hosting, but to be fair, in terms of, they could have gotten a lot worse of a draw, because Group A, I do think of these groups is kind of the one where it feels like a little bit of work to care about how this plays out, if I'm being perfectly frank. But let's go to Norway, just because I do think Norway has obviously, you know, there's some really old beef with the U.S. women's national team between USA and Norway, right? So there is some real history there. But as of late, they have been honestly pretty disappointing on the international stage. Do you see that continuing? Yeah. Do you see some redemption for Norway coming in here?
I don't want to jinx it. I feel like if I say it out loud, it won't happen. And I don't want to do that to them. Like I don't want to be the reason why Norway continue on this just horrible trend. But I do think that this will be better. I think when the draw came out in Switzerland in December, a lot of people looked at that and went, okay, Norway should just breeze through. But that's also just assuming that Norway don't do the things that Norway have tended to do over the past couple years. So they sort of have to get out of this sort of funk, if you will. It's funny that you mentioned like this group is kind of, I mean, one of those that you have to pay attention to and you have to really want to pay attention to. Gemma Granger, who's now the manager of Norway, when the draw was made, she says that someone actually came up to her and said that there were no big names in Group A. Or no big teams in Group A. So she took that like quite personally. She was like, oh, okay, so no one's really going to care about us. But, you know, for a footballing purist, I'd say it's actually a really fun group because they're all quite like evenly matched. But with Norway, people who watched the World Cup, it was extremely disappointing. The Euros before that, extremely disappointing. But you look at their squad on paper, and that should just not be the way that it works. It's like, what's the funny quote? Like, a mystery wrapped in an enigma. Like, that's the Norway women's national team. But Gemma Granger was hired for this specific purpose of being like, okay, how do we turn you into a sum of your parts, but also while letting the parts kind of flow a little bit better? I don't know if y'all remember, but at the World Cup, Caroline Grim-Hansen, she actually sort of bemoaned the law of Jonte, which is this Nordic law of like, okay, you need to all work together. The team is the most important, not the individual. And I talked to Gemma Granger about this, and Gemma Granger's actually a massive darts fan. She loves Luke Littler. And for those who don't know, Luke Littler is kind of like this individual. He's someone who like plays on his individual strengths, doesn't really care about those around him. Also, darts is an individual sport. And so she's kind of bringing in this idea of you need to do work for the team, but you also need to acknowledge the fact that like there are players like Caroline Grim-Hansen who need to operate outside of that system. So if she can get that to work, then I genuinely think Norway have a really good chance of going far. The problem is that she's not really had like all of her players together at once, so she still doesn't really know who her best starting 11 is. I think you're gonna kind of see the first game for Norway be that moment of like, okay, how are we gelling? How are we doing it? If they can click, I think they'll do really, really well in this tournament.
Well, it sounds like the relationships between the players and the coach are more positive than they were during the World Cup, which, I mean, low bar, but it's something, and Norway needs many somethings to work, as you said, for this tournament. So that's a really interesting point about CGH. And I think the fact that she's a winger makes it hard sometimes conceptually to imagine what it means to build a team around her, but also Suffer Ball and Caroline Graham-Hansen should never be used in the same sentence. So may that be the last time we witness that heading into this tournament. Moving on to Iceland. NWSL listeners, and specifically Angel City fans, I think have been paying more attention to this team since the news that striker Svendis Jonsdottir is now going over to Angel City. She will, of course, be competing with Iceland in this tournament. And, you know, Iceland can pose some problems. I remember when they came to the U.S., they scored on them. You know, that's something. What do you think is possible for them in this group, Megan? Because, like you said, it's pretty evenly matched across the four, which makes it pretty unique, I think, as far as groups go. And I do feel like they're trending in the right direction as a team. So there's a possibility for breakout to me.
Yeah, definitely. I actually have them as my breakout team. I've got Jonsdottir as my breakout star for this team. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think a lot of people who've kind of been looking around at the last couple Nations Leagues tournaments will say Iceland are very strong. They just have this tendency over I think like the last calendar year, really just not finishing their games. So they'll get into it, like you say, like they'll score against the US, and then they'll kind of have a little bit of a lapse, a mistake in them, and then boom, they're back down. So I think, I'm trying to think about I think they're now 10 games winless. Yeah, 10 games winless now. 5 of those are draws. And so it's those moments of kind of thinking like, okay, 5 draws is actually really, really great. But then, you know, what little moments are not clicking? What things are you kind of lapsing on? And so that's where Iceland needs to figure it out. But I think in this group, they've got that grace to do that. If they can get the little kinks out of them early, then I truly think they can get at least runners up in this, if not win the group. And then, you know, it's up to them what they go after that.
Fun odds.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked about 3. Let's move on to Finland, which Finland, maybe along with Switzerland, is the team that American people might know the least, right? But to be fair, they're also kind of an unknown to the rest of this group because everybody else has been playing each other in Nations League. So, Megan, what are you thinking Finland's chances are in this game? Is there a key player that we should be watching for with Finland that might turn this group on its head?
So this is going to be probably one of those that is not going to like grab people initially because it's a fullback, and I can't remember the last time someone was like, ooh, a fullback. That's who I'm going to go and watch.
Listen, justice for fullbacks.
Yeah, like, you know, if you go into a store, you're not like, that's the name I want on the back of my shirt. I mean, I guess Alexander Arnold maybe is like changing that. I don't know. Anyway,
Naomi Girma, right? Like,
Naomi Girma, yeah.
Know.
Like Emma
Julie
Koivisto.
for me, but
Yeah. Emma Koivisto is my player. So she was at Liverpool. I remember there were tears at her last game, like leaving. Not many people had like thought they were ever going to really hear from her again. She goes off to Italy to go play for AC Milan, and she's actually been like really, really great in Italy. There's been, you know, not like dissertations, sorry. There's been like, you know, reports and things of people just kind of like just praising her the way that she's been playing. And I think for Finland, she could be kind of just a special player people don't really expect, you know? So I'd say she's probably one to look out for. But the element of surprise across Finland is going to be really fascinating. So like you said, Meg, it's this team that the other ones are not familiar with. And I think this group is just so fascinating in the sense that all like 3 of the 4 have played each other regularly over the last year, which is just annoying. Like imagine like you're getting to go to a major tournament and you're like, God, you again.
Just
really?
saw you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Finland will kind of
prep.
Yes.
Yeah, so Finland can kind of come in there. They would have been watching all of their games against each other too. They can suss those things out. Like I think really it's a great place to be if you're Finnish. For the other ones, not so much. They're probably just like, thank goodness, there's a new face. Like, I'm not staring down the same defender again.
Right. Well, okay, Megan, to close us out with this last question that I actually think is a lot juicier with this group than it is for others, where there are more clear favorites. But Who do you see getting out of this group? I know you said Iceland. If they do what needs to be done, they can come out as number 2, I believe you said. But what's your prediction in terms of who's making it to the knockout stages?
I really think Norway can do it. I think this is a group that I don't want to say it's a given, because I think that's also just like not giving justice to these other teams. It is really, really tight. But if Norway play to their standard, they should get out of this group. And if they don't, it is a disappointment. So I think Norway will get out, and I think it'll be Iceland. I think it'll be really, really tight. But that last game is Norway versus Iceland. And that could either be both of them already through, they're happy, they're done, or one of them needs something off the other. And I think that's the game that I think a lot of people are going to be excited about watching.
Circling it on the calendar. I love it. Megan, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for walking us through Group A, the tight one with some unrecognizable names, but more potential for breakouts. And that, I think, is the fun of this kind of tournament, especially in the group stages. Who's going to stand out? Who are you going to start paying attention to moving forward? And I can't wait to find out who those names are. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we are joined by Cerys Jones, who is on Group B with us today. That means Spain, Belgium, Italy, Portugal. Cerys, why don't we start, of course, with the reigning World Cup champs, Spain. There's been just kind of endless conversation around this team from, that bigger picture, what's happening with the federation, the fallout still from that World Cup final. What's happening from a soccer point of view as they head into this tournament?
I would say they're not only favourites for the group, but I think it's pretty fair to call them tournament favourites as well. I think a lot of these players, the Euros is really like the last thing on their bucket list. A lot of them were there for that World Cup win. Plenty of them are Champions League winners, domestic league winners. Like, the Euros is really like the last thing to tick off for a lot of them. And they should really be favourites. Something's gone very wrong for them if they don't top this group, I think. But it should still be a really interesting fight for that second spot, which I'm sure we'll get onto.
100%. Looking at Spain's roster, though, Cerys, are there any players that you were maybe expecting to make the roster but did not? And looking at those who did, I mean, I'm thinking of players like Claudia Pina, who has been absolutely stellar this past season for club and country, if we're being honest. I'm expecting her to have a breakout Euros. What players are standing out for you, either for their presence on the roster and what they might be able to accomplish based on recent form, or the absences on this roster and how that might affect Spain?
Yeah, I mean, Jenny Hermoso is the obvious one who's absent, who's their, I think, top goal scorer, obviously played a key role in the World Cup and then made headlines afterwards for the kiss with Luis Rubiales as well. She's not present on the roster, which is an interesting call, but to be fair to the Spanish kind of management, there are plenty of other players in that squad that can score goals. It's hard to pick a standout star in this Spanish squad because they are just packed with talent. Claudia Pina, I think you're right to point out, this is going to be, she didn't feature at the World Cup, so this has the potential to really be like a breakout tournament for her, whether that's starting or also coming off the bench. England kind of learned firsthand that she can be pretty devastating as that kind of impact sub, so really excited to see her. I think Salma Pagueo as well had a real breakout tournament at the World Cup, but she's now kind of firmed herself up as a starter. She can be like an absolute nightmare on the wings, so she's fantastic. Obviously Alexia Putellas, I think this is a really important tournament for her as well, because her kind of domestic and international fate hasn't always aligned. She's been at a lot of tournaments with Spain where she's been phenomenal, but they've just not broken through as they needed to. And then in the World Cup, she was kind of reduced to that bit part role after recovering from that ACL injury. So now that she is probably ready to play that starting role, I'm really excited to see her hopefully kind of push on with Spain and play that major tournament role that she really deserves to play.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk. You brought up that second spot in this group. And I think this is going to be where this group gets really, really interesting, because is there a clear favorite between Belgium, Italy, Portugal? My heart maybe says Italy. I don't know what my brain says. Do you, Tamerra, who are you looking at as number 2 before we bring in our expert here?
I mean, my heart is saying Portugal.
Okay.
But with the absence of Kika Nazareth, I, having watched this team live, and I think I watched maybe the last game that she played for Portugal against England in Portugal earlier this year in Nations League, when she subbed on in like the 70-something minute and then scored a few minutes later, the team was completely transformed. And I have not seen them look the way they did in those remaining, 15 minutes of that game since, unfortunately. They've had some pretty bad losses, including to Belgium in Nations League, who are in their group again in this Euro. So that doesn't bode too well for them. I think it was 3-4 plus goals to nil the last time those two teams met. So I want so badly for it to be Portugal. I don't know that it's going to happen. The tragic timing of a key player suffering an injury, I think, is going to hurt them. On the flip side, though, to your point, Italy have been looking good, and I've been paying closer attention to them since the World Cup. I thought that they were really impressive. Of course, so many teams are dealing with federations that are undervaluing and under-resourcing them. Italy is no different. Their success is coming in spite of their federations, unfortunately, but they are going to be really fun to watch, I think. And then Belgium, I've been researching them for The Athletic as we head into this Euros and paying attention to players like Tessa Wollert, who is both a veteran and a prolific goal scorer. I'm expecting this to sort of be a breakout tournament for her, too. And there are some teams in this tournament. I'm thinking of Belgium. I'm thinking of Poland with Eva Pajor, who could stand. They could be those teams where that one-star player just puts them on their back and they muscle through. Long way of saying I'm not sure either, but spiritually Portugal, mentally, I think I'm going to go Italy, I'll say.
All right, Cerys.
Cerys, what about you?
Yeah, let's settle it.
I changed my mind every 5 minutes when I was making my notes for this pod, because I do think that second spot is so open. We've got the kind of recent record from the Nations League of Belgium and Portugal having played one another and Belgium having really come out on top. But then Portugal can be kind of really bright in an attacking way. They've got the pace to kind of break and hit people and create quickly. I think their major issue, which Tamerra sort of alluded to, is they can be really naive defensively. I think you saw that when they played England and went 6-0 down. They have a lot of belief in their attackers and they're so keen to get forward, but they're just not organised enough at the back, I think. And I think that could potentially be what lets them down. They've had some really heavy defeats. They've conceded a lot of goals in the Nations League, which, including to Spain, including to Belgium, which doesn't bode well for them. When it comes to Belgium, though, I think they could have a really good shout. They've got, obviously, Tessa Wollert up front, who is a brilliant goal scorer, a captain as well, and a real kind of leader, and is pretty experienced at a major tournament level. They also have Nicky Everard in goal, who kept the most clean sheets in the Dutch league this season and is a really strong kind of last line of defence for them. And they've had a couple of performances where, they've been really kind of staunch defensively. They've kept really strong sides out for a long time. And then you come to Italy, who are sort of like, they've been touted as like a bit of an underdog or a bit of a sort of dark horse in this tournament. And it's really hard to know what to expect from them. Because they don't have the same, Spain, Belgium and Portugal, we have a pretty recent record against each other that we can refer to. We don't especially have that for Italy, and I think they're also quite an unknown quantity for a lot of international fans because most of their squad do play in Serie A. So it's more difficult to kind of keep up with what they're doing, but they have some really exciting players as well. I'm sure we'll talk about Sofia Cantore, who's obviously just become the first Italian to go to the NWSL. She's fantastic. They do have some really exciting, creative attacking players who aren't afraid to run at people, take defenders on, and also shoot from range as well. So it's a really open group for that second spot, but I think I'm going to go with Belgium to go through. I think that they have got the experience to kind of see it off, and I think Portugal will just stumble at the sort of defensive side.
Yeah, Portugal's most recent form has been a bit of a concern. Meanwhile, Belgium has been on the ascent. So I mean, there are no wrong answers, I think, for this group, especially when it comes to that second spot. But Cerys, when you look at the matches, which do you think? For me, I think Group B is, I'm calling it the popcorn group, as in make sure it's popped before any of these teams play. I think they're all going to be so fun. Even Spain. I mean, yes, they're favorites. Yes, they're World Cup champions. But they also have been somewhat inconsistent. And I mean, in terms of games where you expect them to easily and quickly get on the front foot, take control of the game. Sometimes it's been taking them a bit to score. And of course, once that happens and the vein is open. But looking at the matchups, which do you think is going to be sort of like the defining game of this group, Cerys?
I think that first one between Belgium and Italy should be really interesting. That's the first match day at the same time as, or the same day as Spain play Portugal. And I think Belgium and Italy will both go into that game knowing that if they can get a win out of that and get 3 points out of that, that's a huge step towards progressing. Because I think that they will both... I think all three of Belgium, Italy and Portugal, none of them will ever want to write themselves off going into a game, right? But they know clearly that Spain are the favourites for the group. And I think Belgium will have confidence from their recent results against Portugal. I think Italy will take confidence from Portugal's kind of inconsistency. So that first matchup, like directly between Belgium and Italy, will be such a key opportunity for one of them to really take some confidence and take some points to go forward with, because it could, if it goes down to a draw, then it could be a really, really tight decision for who goes through. So it'll be really interesting to see, but that's the one to watch for me.
All right, Cerys, we've got, I guess, 3 different guesses as to who's making it through in the second spot in this group. So we're just going to have to bring you back in once we have some answers around Group B. But we appreciate you being here and walking us through this group.
All right, we are discussing Group C with our colleague Ali Rampling from The Athletic. Group C, by the way, is Germany, Sweden, Denmark, and Poland. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you both?
Good. Gearing up for these Euros. Let's start with Germany, speaking of which. A team with a very rich footballing history, but in my opinion, the last few, I won't even say years, but generations, have been a bit underwhelming. Ali, what stands out to you about Germany heading into this Euros, and what do you think is sort of the prevailing question that they will need to answer in the group stages in order to sort of establish themselves as a powerhouse?
Yeah, like you say, there was sort of this untouchable figure in European football for nearly 25 years. So it still feels slightly strange sort of talking about them not in this favourites bracket necessarily. But yeah, we were kind of at this place at Euro 2022 as well, sort of saying that they're in this sort of transition period, and then they still went on to reach the final and had an excellent tournament and came very close to winning it. And it was sort of, it was quite a young team at Euro 2022, very sort of transitional, and you know that team is still sort of very much together, but you know just slightly more established on the international stage now. So yeah, they've sort of had 2 very different major tournament experiences in between the last Euros in terms of crashing out of the World Cup group stages, and then doing pretty well at the Olympics in terms of their bronze medal and beating Spain. So yeah, it's sort of quite an interesting time for Germany.
Ali, I want to ask you about the vibes of Germany, because I feel like, at least here in America, we were all watching World Sevens and watching Bayern and being like, is Germany fun? Like, is German soccer having a moment here? Do you think any of that kind of, good vibe energy coming out of what was kind of, in essence, everybody thought was going to be this throwaway tournament, but there is some energy coming off of that. Like, is that going to translate to the national team?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's quite a fun, still relatively young, exciting team, and I think definitely when you look at the sort of the players you get excited about on their team, it's all sort of forward players, like sort of Clara Ball and Leah Schuler and players like that. I'd expect a lot of goals from Germany. They had a very sort of free scoring Nations League campaign as well, which does bode well. But then I think when you look at them, it's sort of a mixed bag in terms of availability for this tournament. You've got Julia Gwyn's come back after missing the World Cup. She was a really, really important figure for them at the last Euros. But then on the flip side, you've got Alexandra Popp's retired, who's obviously this like incredibly dependable goal-scoring figure. And And then really notably, there's no Lena Oberdorf as well, who was like this breakout star from Euro 2022, and like sort of such a unique player in midfield in terms of being very like destructive and combative, but also having real quality on the ball. And it's sort of quite difficult to replace someone like her with just sort of one player, given the sort of variety of quality she brings. So yeah, sort of a mixed bag when it comes to the players they have at their disposal this year for Germany.
Yeah, I think with teams like Germany, the question for me is one of consistency. As we sort of summarize the last 3 or so years of their tournament runs, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. And it's interesting to me that they are in the same group as Sweden, because Sweden, to me, I have similar concerns about their consistency. And again, this is a historic footballing powerhouse, but they have been struggling, I think, relative to what they have been able to accomplish in the past and what they might be capable of. Meg, do you share that concern at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of the story of this Euros is anyone coming into this tournament in a form where they're like so clearly the favorites. I don't think any team can really lay claim to that. So in a way, honestly, maybe that favors Sweden. Just Sweden to me is such like a major tournament team, right? Like, and to be fair, we have long history with Sweden here in the U.S. So like, I think there might still be some bad blood for people watching here in the States against Sweden. But Ali, what is your vibe around Sweden? Obviously, it's also the last major tournament under their head coach Peter Gerhardsson too. So what are you expecting out of this team?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the US relationship before I had to.
We just had to rip off the Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like you both said, they're such a major tournament team, and when it comes to like consistency at major tournaments over the last like sort of 7-8 years since Gerhardsson's been there, you sort of can't really look much further than Sweden in terms of, I think it's 3 successive major tournament semi-finals plus Olympic silver. So yeah, they're such a major tournament team without sort of overcoming that final hurdle really. But yeah, very exciting in terms of when you look at the wide options they have. You've got Joanne Riesenkana had such a fantastic season with Chelsea. She's just such an exciting player to watch, so adventurous. And then Fridolino Rolfo on the other wing as well. So it's they were sort of they weren't necessarily the lacked a bit of cutting edge perhaps in the Nations League campaign. They sort of got held to draws by Italy and Wales, but yeah, when you look at the sort of attacking talent they have, you think there should be goals in that team.
Yeah, and not to mention Stina Blackstenius, like she is still balling. And I think what is fascinating to me about Sweden is I have questions about how they are developing the sort of next generation of players, but then I look at essentially the millennials and they still have it, you know, they're still balling, they're still getting minutes for club. And I do think on top of them already being a big tournament team, that veteran experience, especially if they manage to get out of the group stages and into these knockout rounds in a big tournament like this, is really going to come in handy, and I think could give them the edge over teams with sort of a higher ceiling and are younger, like in Italy, for example. That's what I'm going to be paying attention to the most, I think, with Sweden, is what role and to what extent that veteran level experience is going to aid them and sort of maybe define the margins between maybe finishing first or second in the group. All right, let's move on to Denmark. I think between Denmark and Poland, the other two teams in this group, this conversation is, of course, going to be a bit different than it was when we were discussing Germany and Sweden. Denmark, to me, is sort of like a top of the middle table European team in that they do exciting things. They've had some interesting results recently. But I think in terms of expectations for this tournament, we need to be a bit realistic, right, Ali? So how would you sort of set what would be considered a successful tournament for Denmark heading into this Euros?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the sort of the top of the middle summary there. I think I do have a bit of sympathy for them in terms of the group stage draw again. They sort of don't seem to have had much luck with that recent Euros. They were obviously drawn with Germany and Spain last time round, and then again this is a very difficult group for them. They're sort of one of those teams where you'd think they should have realistic expectations of getting out of the group if they were perhaps in a slightly kinder group. But yeah, given sort of you would expect Germany and Sweden to comfortably finish in the top two here, that sort of is a bit of a difficult ask for them. So yeah, I don't think not particularly thankful to whoever did the draw. I think if I was a Denmark player.
I mean, I think even worse on this front is Poland, right? First Euro tournament. I think currently ranked 26th in the world. This is obviously kind of, Ali, should they just be in the mood of like, hey, we're happy to be here. Maybe we get some dignity out of this group. Like, is that going to be the vibe for Poland? Because Poland, I mean, there's one big player that we have to talk about here, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, completely, and that's Eva Pujol at Barcelona. But yeah, like you said, very much expectations should be if they can get a draw, that would be phenomenal. But also, you know, what an achievement for them. It's their first major tournament. You know, qualifying through that lengthy playoff process as well. So yeah, it's I think anything they can take from the tournament should be a positive, to be honest. And yeah, what a baptism of fire, getting 8-time champions Germany in your first group stage game. So yeah, thoughts with Denmark and Poland this tournament.
It's fair.
Truly. I mean, I do think that Denmark and Poland could stand a chance of, at least when it comes to things like goal differential. Let's say this tournament goes the way, or, you know, in this group, the way that we sort of expect, with either Germany or Sweden taking one of those first two spots. I personally am thinking that Germany will have the edge over Sweden in that final ranking when the group stage games are done. But I do think that if nothing else, Eva Pajor is leaving this tournament with something. I think that by the end of the group stages, we'll have seen at least one banger. I think Poland are capable of still scoring goals. And if they're capable of scoring goals, that means that they can threaten, like I said, goal differential. And that's where I think Denmark and Poland are going to be really interesting in this group, because it will get tight very quickly. And those rankings, whether you finish first or second in your group, obviously matter heading into knockout stages. So I think that for me, the metric will also be, in terms of the whole group, to what extent can each of these teams sort of ruin some dreams or cause chaos? Because that is still sort of a marker of success. And we love it as neutrals in a big tournament, right?
Yeah. 100%. Ali, before we let you go, just real quick, who do you see advancing out of this group? Is it just going to be the Germany-Sweden duo?
Yeah, I hate to be boring, but I think Germany-Sweden are going to take it. Yeah, but yes, all the best to Denmark and Poland.
Truly. I mean, at the end of the day, these tournaments are still opportunities to show potential, you know, and usually in the group stages, there's one or two players that I, at least, did not know about before, that I come out of with, you know, Wikipedia tabs open. I'm following them on Instagram. And I want to believe that there are some Danish and Polish players who we simply are going to learn about for the first time in this tournament based on their performances. And that's never a bad thing. But that all remains to be seen. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on Group C. I'm sure we will be speaking again very soon, because this tournament has already gotten off to a dramatic start and it's only going to get better from here.
All right, last but not least, we've got to close out this podcast with our good friend from England, Charlotte Harpur, because we are discussing Group D, which of course is France, England, Wales, the Netherlands. This has been pretty much called the group of death. Charlotte, agree, disagree? Is this the one group to rule them all?
I think it is. If you look at Netherlands and France and England, 3 of the top 10 world ranked teams. The only closest group that comes to rivaling that is Group C, with Germany and Sweden, Denmark in the mix, and Poland. Wales is the weak link, but yeah, I think group of death is ominous, and it should be ominous because these teams have some serious firepower.
Serious firepower, and also, especially with England and France, serious drama, like in a roller coaster sense. I know that we have spoken extensively about England, and if you haven't listened to our special Lionesses episode pre-Euros on this very podcast, now is your reminder to go back and catch up, because that breaks down all of the most recent shocking news about their roster changes. But Charlotte, let's also talk about France, because there were some pretty glaring omissions on their Euros roster, and I'm curious what you think about how that's going to impact the team as they enter this tournament.
Another trio, Wendy Renard, Eugénie Le Sommer, and Kenza Dali, familiar with our NWSL listeners as well. I think it was a big shock for everyone involved regarding Wendy Renard. Laurent Bonnadet, the France manager, pulled out the Einstein quote, that if you do the same things and expect the same results, then you've got to change something. And he certainly has, by removing Renard from the squad. When you think of France, you think of Wendy Renard. She is the cornerstone. She is the leader. She's been among the drama with Corinne Diacre in the past. A very close and trusted captain under Hervé Renard as well. So Bonnadet has gone into a different direction. I think it's more understandable regarding Eugénie Le Sommer, especially as you've got Marie-Antoinette Katoto coming in as their star striker. And I think France are okay. The group is doing well, and with Kridge and Bock you have a quiet and assured leader. So similar to England and France, there is noise, and player, whether that's withdrawals or retirements or own squad selection, has created that noise, and that is then fueling this narrative from the outside. But what I'm hearing from inside, from both England and France, is that you crack on, and it hasn't rattled the groups too much.
I mean, that is pretty interesting, because I think, yes, everyone here, kind of rubbernecking what was going on with both France and England. But I think, one of the things that has come up through this whole entire podcast preview is that everybody coming into this tournament, like, no one is coming in with, like, this clean slate and, like, beautiful vibes, and everybody's hanging out, right? Like, so do you think this is just kind of like, hey, this is kind of the state of this tournament for really both of these teams? Or, let's say France crashes out, something super strange happens, like what is the narrative going to be coming out of that tournament then?
When you're winning, you can say anything, and you can all the dots have aligned, and it was a masterclass. And when you lose, I think fingers will be pointed, and in retrospect, you sort of said, oh, you should have called this person up, and that wasn't your strongest centre-back partnership. It's interesting, Euro 2022, I remember Sarina Wiegman said, I'm waiting for things to go wrong. And it just never happened, because the preparation was so on point. And you have to kind of roll with it, roll with the punches. It's not ideal preparation for either. And Sarina Wiegman especially will hate the noise. It's one of her kind of bugbears, that she likes to keep a tight ship. It's control. And these things do not help the team unless you actually become stronger together, because your unit has to become closer given the departures.
Well, Charlotte, you've already brought Sarina Wiegman up into the conversation, so this feels like an opportunity to transition to England. Of course, we've already gone over those pretty surprising roster changes, especially coming up so close to the tournament. But setting that aside and looking at the squad that is actually going to be competing in this tournament, I'm thinking about the sort of morale boost of the Arsenal players who are now on the Lionesses, coming up off of that Champions League win, the fun of the World Sevens, things that, of course, existed outside of the Euros, but energy-wise will be carried into it. And I'm also wondering, yes, those roster changes happen within a month of this tournament, but it also feels like a lot of time has passed, relatively speaking. So do you think that the team has actually recovered a bit, at least from the initial shock of it, and are sort of regalvanized and ready to compete, especially because clearly there are expectations that they have a repeat championship, right?
From what I'm hearing inside the camp is that they just don't have time to kind of
ruminate.
Yeah, ruminate, exactly. You have to move on. They have the friendly against Jamaica on Sunday, and England have to start this tournament fresh because they have France in that first game. And, Jamaica is the game to rub off the dust. Even the Jamaica game, if that goes poorly, it sets it up for the Euros. Champions League, World Sevens, but you've got to remember players have had a long season, they're tired, but there is a youthful bounce about England, and they will have to take risks. They will have to pose different problems for opponents because otherwise they will be too predictable. And I think we will maybe see Sarina Wiegman taking more risks perhaps than in previous tournaments.
Interesting. All right, let's move into the Netherlands too, because this is again another team that U.S. fans in particular are gonna know and maybe love-hate relationship, right? Coaching has been a subplot though of a lot of the teams here in the Euros. This is the final tournament for Netherlands head coach. And obviously, Sarina Wiegman coming in from the Netherlands, an England assistant coach is set to take over for the Netherlands after this tournament. Like, there's kind of a little coaching triangle sort of vibe here. Is that going to play into it, or what are you expecting out of the Netherlands for this tournament?
I find this fascinating. I remember the Netherlands beat England in September 2023, and it was as if Sarina Wiegman had lost at the team that she had created herself. And Daniela van der Donk, who's just moved from Lyon to London City Lionesses, said Sarina was the one who taught us to play football. And Andreas Jonker then worked from that foundation. Then you've got Ian Verink, the England assistant, going to become the Netherlands head coach after the Euros. And so Sarina Wiegman said, well, if you're nicking one of my assistants, I'll nick another two. And two of Netherlands assistants are going to work for England after the Euros. If Sarina Wiegman keeps her job, that's for another podcast. But
you're just trying to get yourself invited back on the show, Charlotte. And we will do it.
The thing is, the Netherlands and England coaching staff know each other inside out. And so tactically, there is no place to hide. But I think the Netherlands fixture will be really tough for England, especially because they play France in their opening game. If they lose against France, then the Netherlands game is, a must-win.
Yeah.
Yeah. England-France easily, I think,
appointment
the most
viewing.
Exciting opening. Yes. And the most exciting opening game for any of the teams in this tournament. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about Wales. And spiritually, our colleague Megan Feringa is on this call, making sure it happens. But Charlotte, of course, a different set of expectations for this team, understandably so. But I'm curious, when you look at their three opponents in this group, who do you think they will be the biggest bully to? For me, I'm thinking the Netherlands, just because their inconsistency lately doesn't leave me feeling too confident. But who do you think Wales poses the biggest threat to in this group of death?
I think Wales have a free hit. They don't have any expectations. Their first major tournament, the group of death, no one expects them to get through. So, you have to be quite careful of the underdog mentality that just says, bring it on. I agree that the Netherlands, they could take points off. But equally, if the last game against England, if England really need a point or need something, then that could get very nervy and very edgy. And yes, inevitably everyone's thinking Wales are the poor of the four. But they could be a real nuisance and a thorn in one of those sides.
All right, Charlotte, I'm sure we will be talking to you through this tournament. We cannot wait to see the coverage, and I think we're all just going to be waiting to see what comes out of this group. Do you want to pick a two that make it out? Do you think it's the England-France combo? Do you have any spicy takes on who might lose out here?
I think France-England in that order.
I like that.
Good ending.
I like that.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Okay, Meg, it's you and me again. We have had so much fun chatting with our pals about groups A, B, C, and D, the players to look out for, where we might see some plot twists. But let's do a few manifestations as we head into this tournament, because I think it is really, really fertile ground for some surprises. Let's start with the most obvious. Who is your Euro winner for 2025 and why?
I'm going to go out of left field here and say Germany.
Ooh,
right?
like
I do
that.
think Spain is probably the closest we have to a favorite coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm feeling this kind of resurgence of Germany right at the moment. And I don't know if they have the best team necessarily, but I am curious to see their direction and if they can turn it around after kind of everything that's happened. Euros seems like it's always kind of a good, promising tournament to have that turnaround. So I'll go Germany.
I like that. And I mean, hey, they reached the finals in 2022, so it's not like this is unfamiliar territory for them.
All right,
I like that.
How about you?
I'm going France. I will go on record now and say that I think leaving Kenza Dali off the roster was a mistake. But setting that aside, and Wendy Renard, of course, but in terms of form, I think, I have, of course, an NWSL bias because I have watched her closely every week, but I think in spite of that, it's a very strong squad. I don't know too much about this new head coach, and I do think when they reach the knockout stages, coaching really, really is going to matter. But in terms of the players, in terms of their form, Sandy Baltimore, I think she stands a chance to be MVP of the tournament. She's been fantastic for Chelsea and for France. So they're going to be the winners for me.
All right, I think we're going to probably stay on a France vibe here because we, of course, have to talk about NWSL players that could steal the show. And Tamerra, I'm pretty sure I know who you're about to pick.
Yeah, I mean, I am a Francophile at heart. And I just think that Delphine Cascarino, I'm expecting her to win some end-of-season NWSL awards. You know,
Totally.
like I believe, is
She's
still...
in the MVP combo right now, I think.
Right.
Like, totally.
So, like, I want to say she's still leading the league in assists, if I'm not mistaken.
As of right
okay.
now. Yep.
Super saucy on the ball, extremely entertaining to watch. The lashes, I'm going to get to the bottom of her lash game because that's also as strong as her on the ball work. But I think she's going to be really, really important for France. And I mean, her and Sandy Baltimore on the wings for France. I don't know how you're going to defend that. So she's my pick. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really seen her in the NWSL, but Sofia Cantori from Italy, like, I think this is going to be a good intro for her into the league. And so, do I know if she's going to steal the show? Maybe not. But again, after looking at Italy's group and how it does feel really wide open. This is a player that I think could really make a statement in terms of doing something special for Italy. Again, I do have high hopes for Italy, like actually proving a point, because for Italy, I think it really does matter to get tournament results in order to help justify the concept of women's football in Italy, right? Like they're still in that space, kind of the same way Spain is still in that space. So, you know, Serie A taking off, I think like has been a really important development for Italy. But now that we've got an NWSL player representing Italy again, like that's a player that I'm looking forward to watching for sure.
It's still crazy to me that this is the first Italian player coming to the NWSL. It just seems like something that should have happened by now, but
you would think Jenna Tonelli would have willed it herself. But
you know, she's gonna hear that and be like, you know, I've actually tried many times. It's just the stars weren't aligned in the right way.
I've lit some prayer candles, yeah.
Right. Okay, great pick, and very excited to see her foray into the NWSL after the tournament. But until we get there, we've talked about our winners, like clear, you know, champions. But thinking about wins in a more like broad sense, Meg, which national team in this Euros are you gunning for to get some sort of win as it makes sense for them?
Yeah, the I'm leaving here with something award,
yes,
right?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. That for me is Wales, right? Like we did kind of gloss over Wales in that group a little bit beyond the fact that they can play disruptor role. But when you think about how long and hard Jess Fishlock has worked to make Wales into a program, right? And there are other players from Seattle Reign. This should be a team that NWSL viewers care about, even if the results maybe aren't there. And so what I am mostly hoping for from a heart vibes manifestation point of view is Wales gets some dignity in this first look at the international stage. I'm really, really hoping that we see that. How about you, Tamerra?
Yeah, I'm here for the Wales support. I'm going to go somewhat on the other end of the spectrum with the team that is, I think, expected to do well. But in terms of their growth and progress as a team, this, to me, needs to be the tournament for Sweden. I don't know if they're going to win the whole thing. But when I think about them as these sort of perpetual, always the bridesmaid teams in these big tournaments, when I think about what they're capable of, looking at like individual personnel, JRK, Kaneryd from Chelsea has been excellent for them this season. So many Swedish players who played for Arsenal and just won Champions League. Like,
Yep.
It needs to happen. And I think that they need to go further. I think if Sweden does not advance past the quarterfinals, I will be sad. And so I'm hoping that everything gels for them and lasts throughout the tournament, because maybe it's a matter of losing steam or getting nervous when the stakes start to get high. But I'm hoping for our Sweden specific dub, even if they don't win the whole thing.
All right. Well, I mean, I feel like we've got a lot to look forward to now.
So much to look forward to. We are going to be watching a lot of soccer. And I think what makes it feel different from a lot of soccer we already watch in the NWSL is that these games are just going to be on throughout the week, especially in the group stages. So I hope everyone has comfy cushions, healthy, well-balanced snacks, because we're careening toward a summer tournament, and it's going to be so much fun. I hope you guys got a lot out of this previews episode. I know I learned a lot, especially from the teams that I haven't been paying super close attention to, like Finland, for example. Justice for fullbacks yet again. But we will be talking about this, of course, throughout the month of July, and we hope that you continue to join us. In case you didn't know, The Athletic has partnered with Yahoo Sports to deliver the best first-in-class coverage of women's sports, which you can check out at the Women's Sports Hub, sports.yahoo.com/women-sports. The link, of course, will be in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and welcome to summer. I am Tamerra Griffin, and you can catch me looking for the most interesting popsicle flavors. Let me know what great ones you've had lately on Instagram and Blue Sky.
Meg, again, if you love the show, please make sure that you give us 5 stars. It totally helps us find new listeners. Subscribing, very, very clutch during a summer tournament. So we hope that you stick around with us for the summer and for Euros and for everything else we've got in the bag. You can find me on Instagram and Blue Sky, probably at a Vermont Green game, because that's my summer plans, at least for the next couple of weeks.
And staying cool, hopefully.
Yeah.
This podcast is not possible without our podcast producer, Theo Lloyd Hughes, our video producer, Leah Griffin, and our executive producer, Emily Olson. Thanks again for listening. As always, happy Euros, happy summer, stay cool, and we will see you soon.